All right, here we are, one day later. Still alive, still sharp, still plugging away at the dreams of our faded years and our faded lives. Endlessly replaying a video game known as Doom 2 from 1994, not 1995, as I said previously, and also chainsawing a cacodemon. This is the Chasm, and if ever there were a level that was a meme, or that could be memed, this is the meme level. Why is it a meme level? Because it has all these very narrow passageways to walk on. Also, this first room is wonderful. It uses both the door and the nukage fall textures as walls here, which is, I think, an excellent decision. I think it's one of those weird, quirky things that actually kind of works. So yeah, this map is incredibly divisive. Easily the most divisive map actually in Doom 2 for a lot of people. I personally think it's very good. It's actually one of my favorite maps in Doom 2, and I will tell you why. But surprisingly, we're coming off of Barrels of Fun, which I think is a neat idea, but not really that well executed beyond the beginning of the map. Here it's much different. I think that the entire map really coalesces around a theme very effectively, and it's a testament to how inconsistent Sandy Peterson is. Certainly there's some very strange detailing and lack of detail, but it's obvious to me personally, even in spite of that this level has much more going for it in terms of design, in terms of approach. And yes, you're going to see me, boy, am I going to be spending a long time in this level, because it's actually fairly open-ended, and there are plenty of places that you can go. Actually, a map that I talked about for the Doom mixtape videos that I did by Alfonso for the set Doom 2 the way it did, called, I forget the name of it. It's map 19. But anyway, it was inspired by Sandy Peterson, and that map honestly reminds me of this map in terms of approach, because there are certain places in this map where you have to enter a room a certain way, you have to enter a place a certain way, otherwise you might be screwed, and you're about to see that in a second. So it's a very Sandy Peterson thing to teleport you to an unexpected place. Like, he teleports you to the top of those little columns. So here's probably one of the worst traps, or one of the most brutal traps in Doom 2 history, in the entirety of Doom 2. It's pitch dark. I can't see where the fuck I'm going. A bunch of chain gunners just popped out, and there's a billion demons over there. So you were actually supposed to enter the room to the left and kill those demons first, and then you'd be adequately prepared to go back and do your thing. But that area, I don't actually think that area is required for progression. It's a whole thing, and it opens up that secret that I was just looking at that you'll see much later in the map. But yes, here's the central feature of the Chasm, navigating among tiny platforms. So depending on who you are, you could see this as being total bullshit or not. I think it's kind of interesting what happens when you go to the center of these platforms. Here it unlocks cacodemons, but it also opens up more ammo, which is actually very needed because I wasted a lot of ammo in the previous map of this playthrough. And also, I'm going to need it later because I kind of fuck up a lot in the map after this and have health issues. And I also am doing a thing where I'm kind of just trying to go with the flow. This map actually is pretty good about giving you health, too. You just have to, know where to find it. But maybe it's just that I don't have that much problems navigating among these narrow passageways. But so yes, I mean the lack of air control in Doom is always a concern with people with platforming. You just kind of float in one direction or another, and it's hard to navigate. It's easy to, slip off because most people are playing, including me, are playing with always run on. So yeah, it's difficult, but I don't know. I actually enjoy the challenge because this map very much suggests to you that you need to do that. Here's the worst part. This is the meme area. Yes, and this is really I don't really think this map has a meat, but if I'd call this room the meat of the map. But there's a lot of area platforms and stuff that you don't need to go to, and you can see something kind of intelligent that Sandy Peterson did here. Is a lot of these areas will fill up. So if you fall into them, they'll fill up, so you don't actually hurt yourself. Of course, there's a couple areas, or there's at least one where you get trapped and die. So there's the full gamut of experiences, and that's the kind of stuff that you can expect from the Chasm. Also, I mean, the detail level is not very high in this map, but it's not really necessary because this map is set it's a cavern setting. It makes sense that you would just be, traveling along cave walls. The texture themes and everything makes sense. The lack of detail makes sense. I don't know, it looks, there's something about the map that feels, coherent, or feels like, it feels like an actual place in some ways. There are other areas that are kind of bizarre. The bizarre side areas. This map is really I wouldn't even call it the best and worst of Sandy Peterson, honestly. Okay, you can die if you fall in that pit, by the way, unless you fall into the area with the megasphere or the invincibility and vulnerability. But it's kind of pointless because you have to wait for the entire thing to fill up. So I'm not sure. I think that's just there to be a dick. And this map is again, I wouldn't call it the best and worst of Sandy Peterson. I would just call it the best of Sandy Peterson. It's him in his essence. This is him in his prime, in his most distilled form. If you had to make an essence of his design philosophy and sort of plop it down into one map that really captures everything that his maps represent in the most purest, most concentrated form, it's this map. And I think in a way what I said is true, but in a way what I said is false too. I love this. So this is actually a quite interesting use of detail is you can activate computer consoles in this map, and they're used as switches. Nowhere else is that the case in Doom 2, but that's something that a lot of PWAD authors will do. And that's not something that Sandy Peterson is usually seen as being lazy in terms of detail, but he actually puts some detail into some areas that you would not expect in this map, which is why I really think maybe he just liked this map more, or decided I'm going to work more on this, or just was feeling it more when he was making the map. I don't know. I mean, there's a bunch of empty hallways, but it doesn't really, there's nothing it's not really ruined. The experience is not really ruined by that, or hindered by that really in any way, in my opinion. And if we look at in terms of talking about the high concept, which is something that I talk about a lot with the Doom mixtape videos, this is probably the one video that I'd make a Doom mixtape video about, because it's entirely self-contained. It's entirely within itself. It has its own philosophy or approach that doesn't really exist outside of this map anywhere in Doom 2, and I haven't seen a lot of maps. I really haven't seen a lot of maps that try to imitate this map, to be honest. And I haven't seen a lot that, or at least I haven't seen a lot that do it like effectively. Yeah, where I just picked up the invulnerability, it doesn't really matter because you're stuck waiting there anyway. So it didn't matter that I fell into that pit because it was coming up anyway, but I would have had to sit in the center platform. So yeah, one annoying thing that this map does is it does always teleport you back to that area, and you have to run all the way back around. And given that that's the area that is the most, the biggest source of outcry among Doom fans, yeah. There's places like interesting Sandy Peterson thing number 2. I should make a checklist or something. The teleporter is above you as opposed to below you. I love those platforms that you get teleported to in that room that I just passed. I keep changing it from high detail to low detail accidentally. Interesting Sandy Peterson detail number 3 is that there's like hanging bodies from it too. It feels appropriate for the Hell episode. Even though this isn't like Scream Hell necessarily, I am pretty sure you can die in this room. I'm pretty sure this room is insta-death if you fall. Yes, that is the case. Yeah, and Lost Souls, so that is a dick move. But it's so it so knows what it is. You know, it's cruel, but it's a certain kind of cruel that works within its own logic, and I think that is the thing that I value in design, in art, etc. And like in those Doom mixtape videos, that's kind of what I was talking about. Is I am willing to go along with somebody for a journey if I know that they're sending me someplace interesting or compelling or different. And the Chasm is exactly that kind of level. It might not have like the detail, but it has the overall sort of feeling. It has the overall sort of thing going on in it, and I will show you that area in a second. That's completely optional, but actually kind of adds a lot to the level. So again, an optional area that's quite large, that the level feels incomplete if you don't kind of go to that area too, which is interesting. I could just pick up that red key. Actually, I don't know where you pick up. Oh yeah, that's a separate area. The red key is in a teleporter off from the skull room. This is another map too where I think that I know the layout of it, and then I realize that it's actually more kind of confusing and complicated. I think in general, like, you know, if you would, I would say that like Barrels of Fun is an example of a map that might seem cool at first, but kind of might get old. This is the example of a map that I feel like really grows on you over time. And one that I would play outside the context of Doom 2 if I were looking for, you know, this kind of experience. Again, yeah, it's dickish to have insta death, but you know, it's very much within the ridiculous logic of this level. At least they don't put a pain elemental here. Yeah, and I guess in terms of the detail of this level, it might be justified because you can see in that area the it has like the poison signs. So here I'm going to chainsaw like a billion demons. I'm not really sure this amount of demons was really necessary for this room, but I like this area. It's not like the texture use is actually quite good, and it feels computer themed in the way that like episode 2 of Doom 1 is. It's pretty simple, but because of the glowing lights, it actually works. It doesn't feel under detailed. Also because the nature of the textures, and I like the shape of the room generally as well. It's a pretty simple Like you're just gradually unlocking one area after another. But I do wish they would have mixed it up. I wish Sandy Peterson would have mixed it up a little bit with something that's not a demon, or put something in those areas or something. I don't know. It's as far as like Sandy Peterson-esque side encounters go, I'd say this is one of the better ones. It's up there with some of the side encounters also from what's that fucking map? The Courtyard. Yeah, I'd say this and the Courtyard are probably, I would say, his best maps maybe in well, I mean, we're getting to a couple others that are actually worth talking about, so boy, is it fun to watch me chainsaw demons. So yeah, I mean, if this were the Doom mixtape videos that I did, I would complain in depth about how people don't appreciate the fact that this is an idea, the fact that this is something kind of coherently executed, because in a lot of modern Doom mods, unfortunately, you don't really see that a lot of the time. A lot of the time, there's a high level of detail, maybe a high level of balance to the combat, but as far as like coherent environments, they often have problems like delivering on that in a way that is compelling. Not like there are WODs where it's like every level is pretty good, but no level is great, if that makes sense. And they all kind of fall into a general sort of layout, sort of format. And like when it's time to choose a new texture theme, like the layout, the kind of the way things are laid out doesn't meaningfully change. It's just like the texture theme and maybe the light level that does. And it's really weird when you walk around like caverny areas that like are the same as computery areas, are the same as like, you know, something else. It's just kind of jarring. And I think that's the strength of this map, like it, because of the shapes used, like the shapes, this is a map that like can only be made in the Doom engine, and not just because like, I mean, a lot of John Romero maps have a lot of height variation. There is like the you know, the platforms are flat, but they're so thin, you know, they're diagonal, they sort of wrap around, the shapes are kind of weird. There's something very non-standard, very kind of quirky or different, or you know, something unique about the shapes, about like the, you know. And I think it's a problem of certain kinds of detailing, certain kinds of layouts that are used. Maybe there's like hyper detail on them, but the general approach to the level is, you know, generally like orthogonal, symmetrical. You know, things don't like wrap around, things don't twist around. And this is one of those maps where you don't really know exactly where you're going. Like that area right there seems like where you should go, where I picked up that megasphere. You don't actually need to go there though. I don't actually need to go to any of those areas. This is a death trap. They made it a different color too. Sandy Peterson made it a different, like lava instead of a nukage, which I find interesting. There's nothing to be gained from getting that, which I also find kind of hilarious. Because I'm tempted to go back to where I got murdered with all the chain gunners and, you know, deal with all that stuff. But I spend so long just sitting here that it doesn't matter. And to add insult to injury, you have to kind of keep activating the wall to finally, like, get up and scale. I think you can make it scale, like, infinitely also. I think, like, you can keep hitting the switch here and make it keep going up. I'm not sure about that. I think I've seen a video of somebody doing that though. There's just so many like features to this level. This level is just it gives so much to you as a player, and it just wants to be your friend and also to murder you, and it's just everything wrapped up in one. That's the Chasm. Let's read what Linguisa says while I navigate this trap appropriately. Map 24 represents the pinnacle of Sandy's concept-driven level design. Whereas maps like Tricks and Traps exist to harbor a host of independent ideas, others like Barrels of Fun seek to exhaust a particular mechanic in the game until there's nothing left to give. Again, I do not agree with that assessment of Barrels of Fun, but that's okay. Ensuring that they meet the bare minimum requisite in visuals with sheets of falling nukage. Incidentally, this is one of the 2 levels that texture is used in. I just scrolled away. In the Chasm, this mechanic is balancing on paper-thin ledges and praying to God you don't fall off. It's a level that nurtures a finesse in movement and weeds out all the clumsy. And depending on how you look at it, it makes for one of the most enjoyable or most frustrating setups in the game. I would say both, but that's why I like it. The enjoyment and the frustration is all kind of tied into each other. But with all the attention being drawn to this idea, one can forget that it's also among the most rewarding and expansive levels going from an exploration point of view. The area with the BFG was the last area discovered in either of the IWADs being discussed today. Where was the area with the BFG? I think that's the area that I'm headed to right now, if I remember correctly. We'll see. Because I think I got all the secrets here. And then it plays host to some truly impressive achievements in design. The world's first computer terminal switch may be found here, as in Doom, as can one of the first uses of a mid-texture along an otherwise one-sided wall to divide the upper, lower, and side defs. I'm not sure which that describes. Yeah. Mid-texture to... in any case, yeah, he says it's line 601. The blue room also exists. Chances are you've made up your mind on this map, and all the text is pointless scroll buffer. But I urge you to consider the importance of the chasm in the wider context of the game. You don't want to end up on the wrong... Choose carefully. You don't want to end up on the wrong side of the war. As I said, this is in a voting thread for people to vote on their favorite maps from Doom. So I think this is the area with the BFG. This is a great use of a secret. Again, this is an area that seems like it's required, but actually is unlocked by going through a completely different area. A cool thing that Sandy Peterson does. And I just activated more computer terminals there. This actually, I don't know, this feels like an area from one of the city maps, except it's kind of an offshoot from a larger theme. And it feels appropriate because there's some conflicting themes, like there's the chasm, but then there are multiple areas that are computer themed. So there's a primary and a secondary theme. It's sort of like, you know, like classic Simpsons episodes, how they're structured. A lot of them have an A and a B plot, and to kind of keep you going. This is sort of the B plot of the level. This whole other theme of like computers, and it adds a little bit more complexity or a feeling of like a backstory to the environment. Like there's something a little more going on there. If this were in the context of an episode that really, you know, put on the red hell levels really hard, you know, which it doesn't really do. I guess they wanted a different approach to hell than hell itself. I don't know. In like the episode Inferno in Doom 1. But if this were like contrasting with that, I think it would be an excellent contrast, because it's something like, as opposed to like these claustrophobic, you know, very, very detailed textures with skulls and everything. You have these large, empty, and imposing. It's a good contrast that I really like. It's not really, but because this this episode is all over the map, you don't really see that type of level at all. Like the only level that's like that is the Spirit World, which is by Sandy Peterson, and that's later. So Yeah, we're nearing the end now, but you can see like I was careful about the health, and this map does give you enough health. And in the next few maps, when I start to really eat it in terms of health, because I just decide to like keep going with the game, um, I'm also less careful in those maps too because I played them less, especially Bloodfalls. Like that's a map that I never ever play. Um, it's what was I gonna say? It's you can appreciate the health placement in these maps. You can really kind of get a sense of like how that was done well. Because I'll just be kind of straggling along, and in a lot of other maps, maybe I'd be screwed and have to keep saving and resaving. I mean, some people might pistol start. I I like keeping weapons and continuously playing personally, and especially for the purposes of this, uh, you know, video. But yeah, that was the Chasm. Very interesting map. One that's worth going back to and kind of studying from a game design perspective, in my opinion, personally. A lot of people hate it, a lot of people love it, but you know, that's some of the best art was made that way. It definitely evokes a strong reaction. Which is kind of a contrast to this map. I mean, the one thing I will say about this map, I always viewed it as like the weakest link, maybe in the entirety of Doom 2. Although I don't know, maybe I dislike Nirvana more. I'm not sure. But one thing I will say about it is it does kind of have a hell vibe in that it's dark and kind of imposing and hellish feeling in a way that maybe isn't like, you know, super hell, but I don't like the layout of this map. There's no reason for me to be going into this room right now, and actually it's just an entire waste of my... and I didn't remember that because I never played this map. It's also a pretty short map that I spend way longer in than is necessary. There's also no like suit here, which I don't like. Personally, if you have to pick up ammo, then I feel like you should have to wear the suit. I get that it's makes up for that with the... But like I picked up the Megasphere there, which was a horrible decision, which I will regret in a second, because then I'm just struggling for health for a little bit. That's one thing that I don't like is kind of giving you a dead end and putting the key right there, and then it's like, oh, you just needed to go the other way, I guess. This map seems like it's open-ended, like it's a hub map. Like it's something like, there's a really interesting map in Memento Mori 2 called, it's like map 4. It's called Radamhata or something. But that actually is a hub map, and it starts similarly to Bloodfalls, as you can fall in 4 different sort of areas. Well, I guess you have to start with 1 and then 3 others unlock or something like that. I can't remember. But that is a really and it connects up. That like kind of, really does something with that concept. Here it doesn't. It's not really anything. It does feel kind of dark and hellish. It gives you a sense that like, I do kind of like that introduction into a map of having this dark room with just these candles on the floor. Although, if there were candles there, wouldn't they be lighting up the room? I don't know. Maybe they're very dim candles. This is like... Okay, so this is Shawn Green. This is his first map. I think he was hired not originally as a designer on this, and I'm missing horribly. As you can see. Yeah. I don't think he was originally hired as a designer. I don't think he designed any maps for Quake. I'm not even sure if he was working at id during Quake. But he designed this one map and also 2 maps, I think, for episode 4. And actually, like, his one map in episode 4, map 3 used to be one of my favorite maps. I don't know, maybe just because it was outdoors. And I played Ultimate Doom before I played Doom 2, so I hadn't, like, played a lot of outdoor maps. But But I don't know. Like, this map isn't as bad as not applying the same standards to it. It's not as bad as some of Sandy Peterson's worst maps, because you know that Sandy Peterson has the capability to do better. And this map, like, there are plenty of things where you can tell that if they were expanded upon or made a little more interesting or distinctive, that they could go somewhere. But at this point, if from the perspective, like, from looking at it now and being like, okay, this is by a new designer, it's not actually that bad. You know, it doesn't, like, it kind of has a spooky vibe, which is, you know, certainly a part of hell. But looking at it from the perspective of if you're playing it, you don't know who designed what, and Doom is like such a personal game. Like, it's such a auteur, or, you know, individual author focused level kind of game, much more so than a lot of other, you know, games out there. So knowing that like eccentricities and stuff, and that kind of like you know, stylistic markers of particular authors is cool. But if you're playing in the context of this game, you just kind of want some sort of consistency. And if you're playing after the Chasm and Barrels of Fun, I kind of am expecting something bigger and more imposing, especially with that introduction to this map, where it's like, you know, kind of dark and you have to do a blind fall. And that really isn't like what you get with this map. You get kind of something that does feel like somebody's first map, and you have to question like why it was put in this. Like, if you've gotten this far into Doom 2, I'll explain this in a second. Anyway, if you got this far into Doom 2, you're expecting something a little bit more intense. So I'm playing with Chocolate Doom, as you see, in a window, and I think I bumped the mouse when I was like moving, and it caused like the screen size to change, and in doing so made this like little white line show up at the top of the screen when I refocused it, which I was trying to deliberately avoid doing and then ended up doing anyway. So I apologize for this white line that is there now. I can't see it right now, but it'll show up on YouTube, so whatever. Just ignore it. It's been on like one or two other videos too. I don't know why it does that. In any case, yeah, like, you're playing in the context of Doom 2. This is level 25. You're really expecting it to ramp up in terms of difficulty. And I'm not saying that, like, you know, every map has to be long, but I'm kind of expecting it to get like a little weirder and a little more like unpredictable, because that's the way that, you know, episode 3 kind of shows that hell is more unpredictable, more strange, and you've just seen that with the Chasm as well. And you'll see that with like Monster Condo and the Spirit World like later. So it just doesn't fit. It's sort of like that American McGee map, the Catacombs. It doesn't really fit anywhere. It doesn't feel appropriate for this last chapter. I wouldn't call it a bad map. It's not as good as the Catacombs, but it's just kind of there. It's like the most there of maps. And I think the reason why I used to consider it my least favorite map is because there's like pretty much nothing distinctive about it, other than, I guess, it's dark and moody, which like Monster Condo does much more successfully. Yeah. So I don't know, not really much to say about this map at all, to be honest. Let's see what Linguisa says. Bloodfalls is undoubtedly Shawn Green's best level in Doom 2. It's also his only level. So in that sense alone, map 25 is interesting. It also has an unusual layout for a Doom level. It looks non-linear at the beginning with two different, Bloodfalls to drop down, but one of them leads to an area where the blue key is firmly out of reach, which is the area that I picked up the Soul Sphere in that caused me to have 2% health now, which I'm about to, See, this is like health balance. Like you can tell that they like balance these maps because right at the moment where I'm really struggling for health, I pick up a bunch of health. So very good balance in these maps. Yeah. Requiring the player to double back and attack the level in the right way. I've also been instructed to note this strange floating water cube above the exit teleporter. I completely missed this, so I'll have to like look for it when it shows up on the video. The missing textures of which were apparently on purpose. One of the first instances of a mapper purposefully using a Doom Engine rendering bug to his or her or their advantage. Yeah, I'll have to point that out. Yeah, I don't know, like, the potential for something interesting is here. But this is the thing, like, I'm more excited when I see somebody has an idea that's unpolished rather than something that kind of, I don't know, like, I've been teaching a class in game design, actually. I don't talk about it a lot because I kind of keep it separate from online presence stuff. But one thing that like I personally prefer, and it's not always reflected in how things are graded and how I grade things either, but I personally prefer if somebody has an interesting idea that they just can't really... Okay, by the way, this is a secret where there's a BFG in there, but you can't get it anything. There's nothing in there in the 4th or 5th skill level. And also, it did not mark it as a secret for some reason. I don't know if I died or something, but it says I had 0% secrets at the end, but that is definitely a secret. So I don't know what the hell is up with that. But anyway, like a student doing an assignment or, something like that, I prefer something that is interesting and unique, but not fully realized, to something that is... kind of polished and there, but isn't really, feels kind of empty in terms of ideas. And I'm not saying that this is completely empty in terms of ideas, but it just doesn't like inspire me or move me in a particular way. Whereas like, some of the Sandy Peterson maps, even some of his worst ones, if they were done by a newbie, I'd be like, oh, you have something interesting going on here. The potential for something is greater. I kind of do like this exit area, though. It reminds me of, like, the exit of Episode 1, Map 5 of Doom 1. Kind of the dark confrontation. Yeah, and, like, that's a decently effective use of the Archvile. And it's a good place to panic fire, too. Oh, yes, okay, there's that floating cube. I guess that it's untextured in some way as to create the cube-like effect. That's interesting. So that is kind of an interesting use of something that you don't really see. That's pretty cool. Okay, so I am going to venture into... I'm trying to like make it so that white line doesn't show up, but it's going to be in vain, unfortunately. So I decided to go on to the abandoned mines because it didn't take me that long, and it's a quite a fun map. I didn't get all the secrets. I think I got 3 out of 4, but it's another John Romero map, and it has a kind of a unique aesthetic that we'll see again with his penultimate map, which is one of the most famous and popular maps in all of Doom, The Living End. This is kind of like the baby version of The Living End. And it has another thing that Gotcha has, which is a secret right behind you at the beginning. A pretty substantial secret right behind you, which is cool. It feels like... My favorite thing is when... like you unlock a secret right behind you at the beginning and then it puts you on a different path through the level. There's a map called, there's a map by, I guess it was by Rot King in Doom 2 the way it did that does that, where if you like go to the left in a secret, it teleports you outside to a different area. And I like went through the whole map until I like actually went back to the start because I didn't know where the start actually was because I didn't exit the start like the right way. This is also, I'm playing in a way that like I dropped down in a pit and there's a cacodemon and the cacodemon just like ate my face off, and I decided to keep going instead of reloading right there. Yeah. I'm not used to playing Doom, and I'm also very confused here about where to navigate. I'm not used to playing Doom without mouse look, or with having like enemies being infinitely tall. And that can really fuck you up and instantly kill you if you're not used to that. And it certainly has. Like, that's probably the number one way to go from like 100% to like 0 health very, very quickly. And it sucks, but it is unfortunately just a feature of Doom, the original Doom, that I think is probably improved with Doom, with Z-Doom and all the other fancy source ports out there. So I'm going to be you can see like the way that you play this kind of map changes when you're low on health and you have to be a little more strategic. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting how that kind of unlocks a different play style, or it necessitates it. And it works pretty well for this map. I have to deal with these guys, which is amazing. Like I like don't get hit by them at all here. But then later when I redo this part, I try and BFG them because I'm like, oh, that'll kill them faster, and it actually just hurts me more trying to do that. Or like plasma shooting them. It's kind of funny. There is an element of randomness to like how they shoot you, though. Yeah, dealing with that amount of chain gunners is not fun. I was starting to get frustrated here, but it was a short-lived frustration, thankfully. So yeah, we're getting into the meat of the map, and this map is really exactly the right size. I mean, it could be longer, but like every area of this map feels like it makes sense. This is probably, maybe more so than anything in Doom 2, feels the most like a contiguous environment. Even though it's entirely abstractly designed, it feels like, what is described when you say the abandoned mines. Unlike like Bloodfalls, yeah, there's Bloodfalls in them, but you expect something a little more creepy, a little more like difficult or whatever, and it's really just, oh, there's a Bloodfall. Here the abandoned mines really does sort of capture the essence of this level and this feeling that you're, like catwalks, and it's a very sort of John Romero, like, he knows how to play with limitations to create a style that feels unique and distinct. And he's creating a kind of a setup or a scenario that makes it possible to make an environment that feels, more detailed, more that like it has a sense of identity or whatever. Yeah. I'm going to see what Linguiça says about this. Map 26 is another of John Romero's contributions to Doom 2, and it exhibits many of the hallmarks he loves so well. This is probably the most John Romero-ass John Romero map, because it's not too big. It's not as big as The Living End. It doesn't stand out quite that much. But it's also one of his better maps. But it's not like a weird one like Gotcha or, Industrial Zone, where it kind of does something different, or it kind of rambles a little bit. It's just very self-contained. Yeah, it's the most John Romero-ass John Romero map, which I think is a good and bad thing. It's good because it's very, like, to the point. It's very what it needs to be. But it also maybe doesn't stand out quite as much to me as some of his other maps as being unique. Maybe it's also because I think if you were playing this at the time, this is a map that unlike, like, say, the Chasm, this is a map that is imitated constantly. You can see it everywhere. This is one of the most, like, probably along with the Inmost Dens, probably one of the most, and the Living End, probably one of the most imitated maps in all of Doom, or at least in Doom 2. And I think part of my annoyance with that is just driven by the way that people copied this kind of style. And it can be hard, or sometimes it can be easy to not appreciate the fact that this was, done for the first time here. And playing it also within the context of Doom 2 and not just its own context, I definitely appreciate it more. Whereas there's some maps that I would say maybe I appreciate less, depending on, what map you're talking about. This is a very simple, like, cave room, but for some reason it works. Like, I don't know why. He uses that texture, that, like, weird white rock texture. It doesn't really match with the wall, but it doesn't really matter. I really like that white rock texture for some reason. I don't know why. It's one of my favorites. Yeah. Okay. Map 26 is another of John Romero's contributions to Doom 2, and it exhibits many of the hallmarks he loves so well. Plenty of brown metal and lava. That metal texture, boy, is that metal used so much. Lots of verticality and interconnectedness, constant besiegement from all directions, but not in a way, I must say, that was really that frustrating to me, if that makes sense. It's not one of those maps where I felt... unlike maybe the Chasm, it's not one of those maps where I felt totally blindsided, really. Although the map is abstract as any other Doom 2 map, you nonetheless feel the sense of it being in an old, rundown facility just under the surface. And when you emerge into a large lava-filled cavern to dodge cacodemon fire, that's where I just am right now. While crossing a windy rock path, it feels like something carved out by humans in a previous, better era. Yeah, I can see that. This area, in particular, something about the lighting of this room feels like that. It gives that vibe. Cool. Like, that's a way to do a cool side area. And then the secret, it's something that you can see from the outside, but there's this hidden component. And it sends you back in a different direction to an area that you've been before. You're exiting out of some place that you've been in a different way. That's a very good way to use secrets. Like, John Romero, like, he's like, there's a flow to the secrets. I don't even know if I go to this area. Where is this area? I don't even know where that area is. I did miss a secret, so... there's a flow to... Even to secrets, and that's something he's very excellent at doing. He's the most, I've said this before, he's the most conventionally good level designer for what it's worth in both good and bad ways, because I think his designs are sometimes, design ideas are sometimes taken to an extreme by other Doom mappers without, like, some of the, weirder or a little more idiosyncratic stuff that he did. And once a style has been imitated so many times, it kind of makes you less into that thing. It's like, I don't know. There's a lot of bands that tried to sound like Radiohead, for example, and I like Radiohead, but I made a point not to listen to a lot of the bands that tried to sound like Radiohead because I didn't want to like them less. And I grew up listening to Pearl Jam and actually liked them quite a bit, but I know a lot of people hate Pearl Jam because so many crappy bands had a lead vocalist with a similar sounding voice to Eddie Vedder. So yeah, it's really easy to get tired of something when it's imitated too many times, especially like when the imitation is a not as good imitation. This is I don't know, this is just a very, maybe this area by modern standards is kind of under-detailed, which I maybe like in a way, because it's unique. But this is one of the most, like, technically good, technically sound, or proficient, or balanced maps in Doom 2. I always think of it that way, as being the sort of technically balanced, the most technically balanced of any of the maps, because the American McGee ones, like, are always a little bit quirky and unusual, and like the Sandy Peterson ones are very quirky and unusual. Yeah. I don't know. There isn't much else to say. I'm actually curious how well that did in that voting, the voting brackets. How well the Abandoned Mines did, because it's one of the more popular Doom 2 maps. It's not as popular as The Living End. I don't know. It didn't get to the final. I guess people like Circle of Death better. I preferred the Abandoned Mines to Circle of Death. But yeah, that was a pretty, like, I don't really like Bloodfalls, but those two maps do kind of make up. Abandoned Mines and the Chasm do make up for the previous stuff. So inconsistent, but interesting to go back to. We're going to go to Monster Gentrification in a bit. So thank you and enjoy.